You're like looking off to the side, but that's cool. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, I use this camera for other things like recording like fluids and shit. But
Recording
uh,
fluids.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh,
Okay. That's cool. So yeah, we can just jump right in then if you want. Are you ready?
yeah, okay.
Yeah. Cool. Well, you kind of kick things off for us because you record fluids, and that's strange. I think I know what you're talking about. You because you're interested in um, mechanics, really, things like fluid dynamics and scientific engineering types of things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, so the specific field is called hydrodynamics or fluid dynamics, and uh, I'm actually transitioning. You said I work in automated reasoning. I've been working on that in that for like the last like year and a half or so. But I'm trying to move actually into biomechanics. The more I don't have a word for kind of what I'm working in, but I have some possible people that I might consult. But
Okay.
yeah, if you have any questions about what that is.
Maybe we could start by you could just walk us through what is your technical background, like what have you done so far, and what is your kind of intellectual but also practical background.
So I started in electronics and programming really young. I was repairing guitar equipment for my friends. They had really large Marshall like tube amplifiers and stuff. So I just started off by like replacing tubes and then inspecting like transformers and stuff like that. And just there's a lot of noise involved in audio stuff, and like people aren't exactly people. You got to like look at a lot of nooks and crannies to like figure isolate that stuff. So. Uh, I started programming at the same time I was like learning like electrical audio stuff, and I actually started programming like online MMORPGs because my parents actually would. I wanted to play MMOs. My parents were conservative Texan Calvinists, and they wouldn't let me play MMOs like RuneScape or Star Wars Galaxies or World of Warcraft. So I had to make my own games basically. Uh, because it looked like I was doing work because they were text games. So you play a text game, and it
Okay.
doesn't look like there's no images on a screen. So
So
it just looks like you're programming, which you are, but it doesn't look
right.
like you're interacting with strangers on the internet. And
So that's how you got started. But what about more recently, like the past few years? Kind of, what's your technical background?
So I dropped out of college and immediately started working for a medical technology company. I was writing like operating systems for hospitals, and then they also produced wrote C for. They had like really old hardware for a lot of their stuff, so we did like low level programming too. But then
And this is in Texas. Is that right?
yeah, around the South, some of it in Texas, some of it elsewhere. But I basically there was a point in my career where I was deciding whether or not I wanted to get into high level stuff or the low level stuff. So like signal processing, semiconductors, computer engineering versus like artificial intelligence, automated theorem proving, mathematics, that kind of thing.
So for normal people, explain the difference between high level and low level.
So yeah, low level is like silicon, germanium, like quantum physics, and like semiconductors and transistors and electrical engineering. And then high level is like mathematics, linguistics, cognitive science, philosophy, that kind of thing.
Right. So kind of concrete versus abstract. Is that fair?
Yeah, yeah. But so I was at a point where like I was investing a lot of time in hardware stuff, and I actually wanted to switch into high level stuff. So I got a few gigs in AI, basically symbolic AI. They use some what they call quote unquote machine learning now, but that has kind of a people say there's a difference between machine learning and symbolic AI, but really machine learning began as what was known as connectionism or parallel distributed processing within symbolic AI. So symbolic AI versus like machine learning is like symbolic AI was the original. Oh boy, this gets into kind of history thing of
That's okay.
like
That's cool.
cybernetics is so
Right.
symbolic
We'll
AI.
go over that. We'll go over that. But for now, yeah.
Yeah.
About your background.
Yeah. So right. So I worked in like natural language processing and then automated reasoning. Uh, I guess my specialization up until recently has been like runtime modeling. So formal methods. It's where you basically you expand the search space of some sort of like topological problem or some sort of search problem, and then you try to optimize it for something. And then like whenever that gets into the thing is like not everyone's sure what their search space actually is. So that actually gets into like product design things, because whenever you're just like developing an AI product from like the ground up, like you don't start the search. I mean, unless you have a new, a search, like an actual algorithm, you're starting with an algorithm rather than trying to build an algorithm for what you're, doing.
Right.
But yeah.
So like most recently for businesses, like what do you work on?
Like I said, so natural language processing. The last one was natural language processing and automated reasoning. So it's like systems that can like not only understand natural language, but also the understanding of natural language. And this gets into the history of AI. Is that like cognitive science and AI are really intermixed. So like my last company, this is really like the way it was that like, for example, I was talking more to like most of the problems we were having were like linguistics and cognitive science problems rather than computer science products. So all the computer science stuff has been figured out. It's mostly just a thing of representation. But I actually left that company because I disagree with how you're supposed to approach what we call like AI or automated reasoning or something like that. And it has to do with just the way that I view biology working and the way that I view kind of like the universe working.
Okay, awesome. Well, we'll definitely get into that. I'll bring it back around to biology and the universe.
Okay.
But in the meantime, I want to first say I like your kimono. Is that a kimono?
No, this is not a kimono. This is like a cheap. This is just an Asian looking dress. I don't like. It's just like it's like a boxing dress. Does that make sense? Like the boxing gowns.
Okay,
It's like
cool.
it's like a cheap one that you get like Spencer's or whatever. It's not It's not like kimono.
Well, whatever it is, it's interesting. I would call it a kimono. I mean, you got my drift.
Yeah.
Is that like your style every day, or did you dress up for the live stream?
I work from home, so I can work naked. I can work my underwear. It doesn't really matter. I mean, anyway,
Awesome.
So yeah.
Well, I appreciate you dressing up for the live stream.
Yeah, just for the job you want, not the one you have, right?
So maybe could you tell us about this idea of Pacific dialectical materialism? I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, yeah. So I'm just a redneck from Texas. I've never read Marx or any highfalutin French theorists. That's actually a lie. So they mentioned like Antonin Artaud and like Foucault and stuff in like this one theater class I took in college, and that actually got me really interested because Antonin Artaud is actually had a very like established like technique in his work or whatever. But
can I ask where did you go to university?
I can't. I'm not going to disclose that. But
even though you dropped out.
It was a Southern engineering school. Like it was a military engineering school. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, that's sure. And I'm not prying, but I'm curious why do you have to protect the identity of your university?
First of all, like I didn't like it, so I don't want to give them credit or anything, And
Nice.
Second of all, I don't know, just whatever.
Fair enough.
You put two and two together, Texas and military engineering, university, but
right. Actually, by the way, I should ask you, what do you want me to call you?
Anders, that's my name.
Okay, yeah, that's shown here. Okay, cool, Anders.
Yeah.
And does your family come from that kind of like military background or?
No, we're in the oil business, son. My dad bought and sold petroleum. Okay, so they were basically, my family's a bunch of like miners and prospectors that came from like West Virginia. And then whenever Texas was founded, they came to Texas because, there's a bunch of resources there, and then oil came. So they started dairy farms. They owned the dairy farm land, and then they'd meet with like rednecks and like convince them to sell their mineral rights over a bottle of Jack Daniels, that kind of thing.
So it's basically there will be blood.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's actually really accurate. It was worse than that. That's not that movie's nothing. Like
that's cool.
Anyway, but
okay. Cool.
So like I'll go to another point on that is that the engineering like culture in Texas actually developed heavily around that. One of the first applications for I think it was like the one of the first silicon integrated chip transistors was developed at Texas Instruments, and its primary the first commercial they were using it for was signal processing for like geology and stuff. So oil exploration, mineral and stuff, that kind of thing. And then I've also aerospace, right? NASA and stuff. Anyway,
Okay.
but
Cool. So right. So Pacific dialectical materialism. Go on.
yeah, right. So it's kind of weird that the U.S.'s rural electrification like network, which happened during the Great Depression, like basically like sprang up almost exactly at the exact same time that it did in rural Russia, and the superpowers both developed nuclear weapons at exactly the same time, and they both came up with similar statements about thermodynamics at the same time, and they both came up with similar discoveries about like formal model, like automata theory, and formal computer science and stuff, which isn't really surprising whenever you have such a race like that. But it's very like there the reason I put Pacific dialectical materialism is because I think it's obvious that most of kind of the energy around like the world economy is around the Pacific, right? So like a lot of the raw materials are coming from Latin America, the U.S., Russia and China. A lot of the products are designed in California and then produced in China, Taiwan, Korea, and all that. So I kind of see the Pacific area as like a new world, and Europe and the East Coast of America as like the old world. Does that make sense?
Sure.
There's a book called The Yankee Cowboy War, and it's about how during the Kennedy era and in the LBJ area, all of the old like East Coast money, like the power actually shifted west to the new like aerospace, Howard Hughes kind of money that was springing up in Texas and Southern California, Palo Alto, those kind of people.
Okay.
The JPL.
And so, what is the main idea behind the Pacific dialectical materialism? What is
like I was saying earlier, is like the reason I started writing it is I'd been reading all these tankies write these really long essays on Twitter, and I wanted to like emulate that style. So. But the thing is, I hadn't read Marx, so I bought Das Kapital for $4 on eBay, and I read Das Kapital, and I tried to understand his language, and I was thinking about it in terms of my own kind of ecological, biomechanic way of viewing things, and then I wrote that up, and it actually came out to having kind of a coherent idea, and most of like what I write in there is to kind of set up the core idea, which is dissipative history and then conditioning affordances, and it's kind of describing like cybernetic feedback relations between the ecology, the labor ecology, and the labor itself, and like that gets into the whole like how technology is shaping us, but also just how like geography shapes us, which gets into the Pacific area of region. Is that it's the closest kind of area for all the communication to be firing back and forth.
So what can biomechanics teach us about the dialectic and specifically the Pacific dialectic?
Okay. So there's a Russian thermodynamics guy. The Russians are really good at thermodynamics, like statistical, like physics modeling and stuff like that. And he came up with the idea of dissipative structures, and it's related to like the cellular automata model of biomorphogenesis. But the idea is that there's latencies in the universe. In other words, the idea with dissipative history is that everything is kind of formed by the latency of the process that's forming it, and then also just things. There's the latencies are tied to some sort of geographic or geometric area in space-time. So information and processes can only expand as it's from a central point like at a certain speed, which means that there's no like relativity already taught us that there's no linear history in physics. I mean, there kind of is, but it's relational rather than whenever you're building distributed systems, you actually there's a crazy computer scientist named Carl Hewitt, and he's actually like made extreme statements that he said like you can't even formally model distributed systems because you can only do it like he has this model called the actor model, and it gets into like Bruno Latour's theories about actors and networks and shit. And anyway, there's no consistency in distributed systems because you can get conflicting information from different actors like at different times, right? Or even from the same information.
I think one way to summarize what you're saying, you can tell me if you agree with this or not. But are you basically trying to say that Neo-China arrives from the future?
I don't. Yeah, Nick Land. Like again, I think Nick Land. You talk to Nick Land. I feel kind of honored that like I'm talking to someone who's like talking to Nick Land, and that like I've made like fan art of him. Like it's kind of strange, but I don't.
Well, I would
I
say
view Nick.
I would
Go
say that
ahead.
my live stream recognizes no gradations of prestige, and
Oh, okay.
I practice a very kind of lateralist orientation when it comes to looking for insight.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, don't flatter yourself, but also you're
Right.
welcome here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's just I don't know how to read. Again, I don't know how to read that kind of stuff. It's like cabal. It's it's like cabalic almost. Like you just pick things off, and it's like okay.
Right, but basically, I mean, it sounded like you were kind of getting closer to that sort of idea, but from your own biomechanical perspective. So maybe we go slow. Maybe we should go slower. And I feel like with your background, you can actually, if we go slow and stay focused, you could actually teach us something about this idea because you were kind of getting closer to it. You were talking about how in low latency, highly distributed contexts, it changes
Well,
how we think
yeah.
about time. Is that fair to say?
Well, it's not even just low latencies, but high, like any latency at all. Like it makes sense. Like there's a geometry of space time.
First of all, explain to people what latency means.
Yeah, so latency is just like how like high latency is something slow, low latency is something really fast. And so like latencies, for example, of like internet lines, right?
Right.
So they set up high speed fiber, photon fucking communications between the Chicago and the New York, HQs of the stock trader companies because the lower latencies they can get, the more they can like actually synchronize their information and stuff like that.
Could you tell us what is the name of the Russian guy? Someone wants to know.
It's Ilya Prigione. Just let me Ilya. Just type in Ilya Priogone.
Oh, I think it's pronounced Prigogine.
Yeah, Prigogine. Yeah, in terms of dissipative structures, he's the Russian thermodynamics guy that came up with that stuff.
Right on. Okay, right. So go on. So you distinguish between high latency, low latency. How does that affect how we think about time?
I mean, again, if you read like it's how we think about time. So Bergson and Einstein have this argument about what the nature of time is, and so I don't think of it in that sense of things as much as how it affects like histories and how it affects processes. Because if you want to see how it affects physical time, just read Einstein's stuff on relativity. Like he wrote a book that actually like just goes through the whole train and ruling rods and that kind of stuff in his own words, and it's actually pretty good.
Let me ask you this. Is there a way for you, with your background, is there a way that it makes sense to you to talk about the future causing the past?
No.
Okay, I was just curious. That's fine.
I mean, like the future is anticipation. So like, I talked about this on Shawnee's stream once. Like, Prince Hubris was about quantum Bayesianism, which is like these people that think that the brain is some sort of statistical expectation computer. But yeah, I mean, I don't, I mean, I feel like if you want to get into like mysticism, there's like heavier shit out there, that you could relate to like engineering stuff. But
well, you were saying before, you were talking before about nonlinear time and how linear time doesn't make sense.
Well, that's more. It's just nonlinear time in the sense of how events arrive. Now, nonlinear time, I think what you're really getting at is like, I mean, the real big can of worms that opens up is like whether or not you can know like memory is correct. Because if you can just alter someone's memory at all times, then time becomes nonlinear for them because time just becomes this kind of ribbon you're kind of pulling through them. So I mean, that's the kind of scenario I think of whenever I think of nonlinear time is like, some evil demon, manipulating,
right.
how you.
Okay, how about this then? Help us understand what is a dissipative structure exactly.
Right. So like entropy. So you drop. If you whenever every time you see like crystals growing, right? They kind of grow out in these trees that were either increase or reduce surface area according to whatever properties and all that. Corrosion forms or spreads kind of around the area. There's these things called tin whiskers. and they're actually these like microscopic little like atomic buildups of like tin and other metals like silver that'll like literally like sometimes they think it's like actually tunneling like out of the chips and stuff like that. So everything's dissipating all the time, like, nations split up, the seas fall into the cliff sides.
You could say it's rhizomatic.
I mean,
no,
a rhizome, you're like a rhizome's like a plant, thing. That's more of a I can get into the biology stuff later, but I think I'm kind of going to start slow here. Once you get to biology, you're talking about like even more nonlinear or whatever.
Well, that's okay.
But
I got a sense that the concept of the rhizome is fairly consistent with what you're saying about dissipative structures, but no need to get sidetracked. So what is so important about dissipative structures to you?
It's a fairly, it's a fairly totalitarian model of physics and material history. It describes it's not a calculating mechanism. Like, it's just like a heuristic about entropy and how things react and build up. There's actually a company I saw a long time ago that was making something like thermodynamic computers, where they're making computers by like burning something or something like that, or by doing something. I can't remember what it was, but you're asking about dissipative structures, what I think about them.
Or why are they significant? Why is that? What can that teach us?
So like in my piece where I talk about the structure, like structures of dissipative. So it's a dissipative structure. So entropy is a given, but the idea of a dissipative structure is that it unfolds according to a certain pattern, right? Trees grow like trees. Mountains turn into valleys through with rivers and all that. So it leaves behind a kind of trace. So in my one of the things that I note in the Pacific Dialectical Materialism piece or whatever was that we didn't we emerged from the evolutionary tree of life, but we actually didn't conceive of it. Like the structure as an abstract structure didn't actually exist until we had developed ideas of taxonomy. In other words, we developed taxonomy before we developed the evolutionary taxonomy, which is kind of that's one of the important ideas of dissipative structures. And dissipative structures may not be able to realize they may not be comprehended until the means comprehended are acquired, and the way that you look back at them is affected by how you acquired those means, right? So all of the different formulations in biology and natural philosophy that led Darwin and the German naturalists and other stuff to make all these phylogenetic statements. They were based on a tradition of trying to find hierarchical patterns in nature and stuff like that.
Right. Okay. So is it reasonable to understand societies as dissipative structures?
Yeah. So we're I'm not making assumptions about your background, but we're what or I guess you're not American, you're in England, but you sound American. So
yeah, I'm American.
Yeah, so we dissipated from Europe, because of religious wars and stuff, like people dissipate, right? Families, break up, reunite, and form, and children crawl out of women's wombs and that kind of thing, like it's whatever.
Right. Okay, interesting. And you were saying at the end there that there's something about dissipative structures in which what emerges in later stages of the dissipation kind of changes how you look back on earlier stages of the
system. And vice versa. So it also gets to the whole chaos theory and nonlinear systems of initial conditions changing the outcome like miraculously. So if you never especially the dissipative structures that Prigione just studied were specifically chemical reactions, and then there was another guy who actually came up with a formulation for actually doing computing with that, like analog computing. It's sensitivity to initial conditions, the whole chaos spiel, and it doesn't really my statement about dissipative systems in history doesn't really say much other than just acknowledging that, hey, material history is dissipative, and people, a lot of people forget that and treat material history as if it's since Hegel and since all these other intellectuals have come along, they've talked about they've tried to like treat things that are alive like that shouldn't be treated like they're alive in some kind of poetic sense. So it's just kind of a matter of bringing it down to the nitty gritty, right?
Okay. Okay. Interesting. And so, are you a Marxist or are you like an edgelord neo-reactionary?
I the only I mean like Marx is really effective, right? Like Marx. I didn't read Marx until like literally like a week and a half ago. So I'm not a Marxist. I wouldn't consider myself a neo-reactionary either because they're I made a statement that they're all like urbanite hedonists. They all like just keep bitching and moaning about urbanites and hedonists, but they're all urbanite hedonists. Like, haven't you noticed that?
It's an interesting point. Yeah, I do know. Yeah, there's some truth to that.
And there's some guy that was in the NRX movement that like wrote an article is like neo-reactionaries are like complaining about cities and they won't leave them. Like, just leave, like exit, right?
Right.
I mean, it's exit is a computer command. Type it in,
Do you like living in the South?
I love it. It's cheap. The people are nice. Like, I went to like Asia. I'm not going to say people are rude in Asia, but like my only like heavy urban experience is whenever I was like consulting in Asia, and like it's just the air quality's bad. You can just feel in your body. You got to live next to like something that's like a forest or like an ocean. Like.
Right. I think I might end up moving to the South actually of the U.S. just because it's cheap. I don't know if you know much about my situation, but I'm leaving my job and I'm leaving England, and we're gonna have to resettle. And yeah, we're looking at maybe the South of the U.S.
Yeah, dude, it's cheap.
It seems like a good place to go if you want to be like a weirdo intellectual and just kind of like drop out of society and go go down some like weird vectors and like live on the internet. Like the South seems like a good place to do that because you're kind of away from all the like coastal urban
whenever I talk to like Silicon Valley like tech people, they all talk about the same thing, whereas like all the people who are like in the South of the Midwest like don't talk to each other. So like they don't meet at cafes, and hacker spaces and shit. So like the guy in the Midwest that's like just like rediscovering ether theory and like proving Einstein wrong, that guy isn't talking to the fucking Ruby on Rails dev, in Silicon Valley. But yeah, it's right. Different folks, different strokes and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, my plan is to just live on the internet, so I can be physically located anywhere, and then do this kind of stuff and have whatever communities I want to have.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's basically I've basically been living that way since like my teens, and like that's a good way to live.
You're happy?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. The reason I got into biomechanics is because I don't want to say I have chronic pain, but I kind of do, and like it's mainly just from like bending over a computer for like 20 years, like something number of my life, and like just trying to be more aware of my body and stuff like that. But like other than that, yeah, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I forgot to ask, how old are you, if you don't mind?
I'm 25.
Cool. So one of the things I think chatted about, possibly talking about, is the fact that you are a little bit younger. I think you have some takes on kind of the younger generations.
Yeah, so I really like I said, I really like Pine Tree Twitter, like the eco-fascists, because they put their mouth where their money is or whatever.
Are you an eco-fascist?
I mean, so like the ecology is already pretty fascist. I mean, unless you want to get into like whole like mushroom entities and and like plants, talking to humans and stuff. Like, nature is generally fairly Darwinian. So I mean, like eco-fascists like have a point. It's just a matter of whether or not like it's as dire as they think it is, and it's pretty damn dire. I mean, like the worst thing. So I have a friend that's actually an aquatic toxicologist from Canada. And he doesn't research one like impurity in the water. He researches like millions, and the list just keeps growing, and it ain't looking good. So I mean,
so you're bearish on global warming. You think it's going to get real bad real quick?
I mean, again, I could care less about global warming. Like, they're fucking, the turn of the goddamn frogs gay. I mean, that's not a joke. Like Alex Jones is right about like 70% of things. It's the 30% of things that he like fucks up and like gets like the endocrine disruption thing is a huge thing because plastics are all part of our lives. But yeah, so I generally see the younger generation go for the more extreme stuff, but also the stuff that's more immediately pressing to their survival because the eco-fascist concerns are real concerns. It's not as much like the white identity stuff where, I mean, like, well, the eco-fascism stuff is tied to white identity, but it's because they believe that the race is like very important to their survival. So, like, they are concerned about survival. Whereas, I feel like Richard Spencer is more, he kind of like, wants to sell books or whatever, like.
Right. I know the distinction you're trying to make. So
Yeah.
Are you kind of saying that as a 25-year-old, is your sense that Generation Z makes up a portion of the Pine Tree Twitter community? Like there's overlap there? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I've seen it. It's generally like older folks who have already like gone and lived off the land and are calling on Twitter and showing it off, or it's younger folks who are like, I live in the burbs and I want to go live like John Muir or like Christopher Candless or whatever.
So you've met people from Pine Tree Twitter, like in real life or internet communities?
So funny story about that. I was actually one of the like first famous trip fags on like the 4chan outdoor board. So whenever I dropped out of college, I went and lived in the woods of Huntsville, Texas for like 6 months working for a furniture store and living in my car in the woods.
By yourself?
And then, yeah. And that was right. Yeah, that was right before I worked for the medical company. But yeah, like, I don't know. It's just, it changes your perspective on like life, living in the outdoors. And like, I think there's, a huge disconnect between not even just the spiritual level, but from a very real biomechanical level. So there's a field called psychoacoustics, and it actually studies the relationship between human psychology and neuroscience and the mechanical airwaves that create acoustics. And what they found was that like natural sounds actually increase the lifespan of rats that are living in cages and in natural, or not in laboratory conditions. And they found that living in a city is like, it's above cannabis use and above childhood abuse. Living in a city is actually a higher risk factor than either of those for development of schizophrenia and bipolar. So I think there's actually a very real biomechanic like disrupt going on at the cellular level in regard. And, we've seen this with birds, like they're developing fucking differently. They're beach shortening and adapting, but I think from like a very mechanical level, like the city like is messing with some very primal, metabolic processes.
Okay. Yeah, it's turning the birds gay.
Yeah, I mean, and then also just things like smog too, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you kind of have one foot in Pine Tree Twitter, but you're not like hardcore into that.
No, I mean, I like, look, if they came up, if some guys came up to me and asked them to like work on their farm, or do tech stuff for them, I'd do it for them. I don't agree. I think a union between left environmentalists and right environmentalists would be like for the betterment of the whole environmental cause. But yeah.
So are you more on the left or more on the right, would you say?
I don't know. Like I'm an opportunist, like I've never voted. I was raised, Calvinist, kind of like libertarian, like, Gen X Reaganite kind of parents. But I see it as politics is downstream from biology and geology. So I kind of see everything in geologic time.
So what is the main causal factor of geology on politics?
So this gets back to the whole dissipative history, and that if you understand dissipative history, there's no central single historical subject. There's just kind of points on this big infinite plane, right? So, there's no. I don't think there's a prime. There are large movers in history that affect a lot of things, but I don't think there's like, what the Catholics would call a prime mover. I'm very Calvinist in that regard.
I see. But maybe because we haven't talked too much about geology, I'm just curious, like what do you think is the most underrated or least understood implication that geology has for thinking about politics?
So sources of energy. So I have a really good book about the development of the petrochemical industry in Texas and Russia and the Middle East, and mainly. And I think like Reza Negastari got onto this, and like if you heard about the whole like the Middle East is alive or something like that. But there are there's pockets of like potential energy, right? All the energy comes from some source, whether that's a sun or gravitational energy or whatnot, right? I guess if you really want to get like crazy, is if you just imagine kind of the universe in terms of gradients, so gravitational wells, like the Earth being one gravitational well, and then the gravitational well of the Earth being the sun, and the Earth's the sun's magnetosphere as another gravitational well, and you could trace that all up to whatever super gravitational well we're all part of, kind of thing.
Have you ever read John Michael Greer?
I actually have. I actually a book crossed my palms at one point of his, and I don't like him. I think he's kind of an idiot.
Oh,
like
really?
He never talks about anything specific. Like he talks about the same stuff that like the Lindy and the kind of the Nassim Taleb crowd type. But like if you actually read the content of his articles, like they're just completely like it's the same thing just repeated over again. Oh, there's cycles in history that we're going through a bad cycle, and the people think that bad things can happen. It's like, yeah, we understand that. What do we do next? Like.
Well, I think he has some stuff on that. Like, do you buy the basic kind of peak oil narrative?
It depends. So, like, I don't know. People act like there aren't central planners in this fucking economy, and there are central planners. So, and people act like the central planners don't take into account things like resource, things they do.
You mean like planners at big geological?
I'm talking about like the Rand. I'm talking about the Rand Corporation. I'm talking about the Club of Rome. All the kind of people that the Illuminati type, crowd.
Right, but there is a kind of distributed system of corporate actors that.
Well, and also military mainly, because the people in the know view the Earth as kind of like a big agricultural plant, right? It's giant farm to the rich, right?
Right. Okay. Someone wants to know if you can draw a diagrammatic connection between dissipation and convergence.
I mean, converge. So like, there's convergence. There's like, there's like attractors, right? So, like, the whole like parallel development. So the whole like thing of Russia and America developing a mass electrical economy and nuclear power at the same time. They're the whole. That's why I brought up the whole conditioned affordances. Is like what like to bring it to like kind of like what we're like experiencing right now is that we kind of the Cold War arms race never really ended. Like the space race wasn't a space race as much it was like a god race, right? Because like they weren't developing they weren't just developing space exploration just for fun and howdy doody. It's a defense scenario, right? So like it goes for everything. Biochemical stuff. I'm almost absolutely sure that DARPA is working on a project to make nanobots that are indistinguishable from normal pathogens, and then they're going to hide that in the populace of America because
we're going deep conspiracy theory now.
No. Here, let me explain something. So get this. So say you had a pathogen, or what looks like a pathogen, and you find out that it's actually like something that China engineered to like spy on the American public or to like affect their DNA in some way. So if China was good enough to where they can engineer that to be like natural looking, how would you tell that from a normal pathogen?
Right.
Well, you can't anymore in this world. So how do you prevent that? You prevent that the same way you prevent that in computers. What you do is you install a backdoor on all the computers so that you're the first. So that you're now the first people to know when the systems are being hacked. So I think they actually have an initiative called the National Immune System, which is actually already kind of describing approaching this. So
is this public?
Yeah, just search up the National Immune System, DARPA.
So do you have any evidence for the claim that DARPA is preparing to infect us with nano-organisms?
Just some spooky stories from Los Alamos, if you want to. Oh,
Okay, so
maybe
you're
for a
speculating.
different time.
To be clear, you're guessing.
Yeah, I'm speculating. Yeah.
Okay, that's okay. You're more than welcome to speculate. That was quite an interesting speculation. I just wanted to clarify for listeners that we're not spreading that as fact necessarily.
I mean, I am like in a like this needs to get out kind of way, but okay.
What are the other most significant unknown things you think are going on?
I'm almost absolutely sure that quantum computers were developed before the 70s. I think they were developed. I think what happened is they got John von Neumann and all the other Hungarian Martians in a room after the Manhattan Project, and I think they said, "Hey, that was great. Let's keep it up." And notice how notice how like their research got really quiet for those 10 years after 45, right? You know, so like I think there, you know, whenever you're talking about the laws of nature being a defense issue, like I don't think current, the military physics is obviously way ahead of what, civilian stuff is or whatever, but like I think it's even beyond what we can even think it's possible. But anyway,
Interesting.
What I do know is I've heard stories of like multi-deca megahertz processors in the early 60s, and that's whenever they were still clocking in at like, whatever, like only a few, like 10 something hertz or 100 hertz or something like that. So
interesting. So do you from your experience doing automated reasoning, given that that's kind of your technical expertise right now?
oh yeah, no, I think they came up with this a long time ago. And another thing too is I don't think necessarily America was the first nation to come up with it either. So like another theory I have is that it's possible that a previously developed civilization like India or China could have developed, like, for example, like Boolean algebra and circuit switching before we did. And like they would have a defense reason to hide the development of anything like that. And I know this gets into like ancient aliens territory, but like, the conspiracy world is weird for a reason. And it's weird because it's partially true and because truths related to like governance in the modern era of like, nanomachines and nuclear weapons is really weird.
Right. Someone has a question. What is the opposite of dissipation?
Fucking like coagulation. But then again, there's also kind of not, it's like, what's the opposite of entropy? Well, I guess like, Satori, right?
Satori? I thought it was negentropy.
Well, I mean, yeah, negentropy. I'm talking about like entropy as like a universal law. I'm not talking about like negentropics and like in the modeling sense.
Right. Okay. Someone was asking if the opposite of dissipation, it would not be something like emergence.
I mean, yeah, I mean, it's the kind of same coin, but not really opposite.
Okay. Interesting. So from being a 25-year-old, tell me other things about the youth today. Do you think that they're going to become more like reactionary in response to the cultural politics of the day?
They like gaming. They really like gaming. I think they're going to get really. I think the most interesting fronts are trans politics, all the politics related to like. I mean, there's a big divisor between like socialism and capitalism, and I think there's a big fear, especially among American Protestants, of like everything becoming like the 666 AI, Lucifer machine, like controlling everything. Like there's an actual Texas preacher that like had this whole mythology about how like the 666 like is a computer chip and how like they're implementing like a system right now that's anyway. But that's part of their eschatology, and that's really tied up with how they view socialism, is that it has a potential to turn into like a big kind of matrix type scenario.
Wait, hang on. All right, this is interesting. You're saying this is a popular idea among the youth?
I see that like in reactions to socialism versus capitalism, whenever you go far enough down to like the tech rabbit hole, or like far enough down the discussion of what's going to happen in the future, it eventually comes down to people saying, well, I don't want the AI machine to like kill my son because it costs people less, that kind of thing.
Right. So what were you saying though about 666?
Oh, so there was a preacher in Texas who came up with this popular meme called the 666 Beast Machine. and it's just like referencing King of the Hill. But it's like this machine that collects all of your information. It's like Descartes' evil demon, but it's like the IRS, and it's just like it's like constantly injecting you with like, you know, fluoride and like gay hormones and stuff like
Turning the
that.
frogs gay.
Yeah, but
So is this like a right-wing libertarian preacher kind of meme?
No, it's a huge, like I said, it's actually a really big thing. Like I knew about it a long time ago, but like I knew it was big enough because I started seeing books of it in random bookstores around Austin, Texas. So it's big enough that people are buying his books. Like,
and are you saying that like kids today are kind of taking on that idea?
I mean, kids today know what's going on. Like, so I talked to my little brother about like this stuff. He understands completely that, you know, how AI is going to affect his future and that everything. So here's my thing. So AI is not going to be the big thing. So like one of the other kind of theories I have is the difference between circuit switching and computation. So do you know what? Okay, so circuit switching, a lot of the algorithms developed in like servers and telecommunication networks were originally developed for like power relay stations to keep the telecommunications lines running and stuff like that. And they needed to make it so that if one of them went down, the whole thing wouldn't go down, that kind of thing. So like Claude Shannon, the guy that, you know, invented, you know, information theory and all the other guys like him, like there's an equivalent of him in Russia. They claim that they invented Boolean, you know, switching of circuits, but like circuit switching, I'll give it a good example. So like, is a video card a computer? Well, yeah, I mean, it computes graphics. Does a video card have CPU? Well, I mean, like, you know, the classical video card doesn't have a CPU. It has a VGA, and that's just doing a bunch of, you know, matrix operations and stuff. And, you know, it's all a data flow architecture. So it's more like, it's rather than being like this, like the central CPU that's, you know, that's taking instructions and, you know, writing it to RAM and stuff like that. It's more like a phone switch operator. You know, the second, you know, the plug in and pull out. You know, like I'm trying to describe something called data flow architectures, but so in biology, you actually want, so computation on the other hand is not circuit switching. Computation is you're describing some mathematical formalism, and then you're counting beans to, like, you know, go through the process. And generally you're using some kind of like discrete math, you know, entity like a counter or a register, you know, something like that. Biology generally wants circuit switching because circuit switching is cheaper and it's faster. Computation, so like, for example, the higher processing parts of the brain evolved out of like the vertebra and the reflexes and stuff like that. It's why language is so tied up with like manual expression, with hand signs, facial expression, stuff like that. The body can afford to have Freudian slips, but it can't afford to not have a pulse keep going, right? Mm-hmm. So circuit switching is, I see circuit switching as like things generally optimized towards getting the work done in circuit switching rather than getting it through like computation, which is like having to separate and store separate, knowledge bases, having to encode and decode things.
Okay. That makes sense.
Circuit switching is the lower latency, and computation is kind of the higher latency.
And is it a true fact that biologically, like biological systems do in fact have more circuit switching than computation? Or is that kind of just a metaphor as you see it?
It's so this is where you get into the question of, can natural systems store symbols? And that's actually kind of something that I'm doing as like my own personal research, is like there's something called ecological cognitive science, which was kind of invented by James J. Gibson. But since then, it's been developed by like these Japanese cyberneticists, and what they're specifically studying is like mortality and like mortal organisms actually are more likely to achieve species immortality because they can sacrifice like short like resources. But like the question is, can the ecology store symbols? And like one of the things I mentioned in the Pacific Dialectical Materialism is that labor ecologies are the unit of reproduction in biology. So like, for example, like Walmarts reproduce, pool halls reproduce, bars reproduce, any time that we do things that we have some sort of affordance that we act out upon that's like the stable attractor that generally like reproduces because it's it's helpful to a lot of things. But like yeah, there's
Okay,
I mean
this is good. This is
we
good
already
stuff.
well, so I guess to my point is we already know that we can store symbols in our environment because we can write numbers on pieces of paper. We can write Google documents. We search the things on the internet. So we know for a fact environments store symbols that aren't like necessarily stored immediately in the human's brain, right? Like
Okay.
anyway.
Mm-hmm. Right, but you're kind of saying that circuit switching is preferable.
So
Is that true for cultures too? Do you think for like building culture? Is it?
yeah, I mean, so like a good example, I guess, is like Trump. Is that Trump? There's no computation with Trump. It's all circuit switching. Like it's all like you're either for or against kind of thing.
That's a good point. I know what you mean.
Like it's an immediate visceral. It's an immediate like visceral reaction. And not only that, but if you tried to compute like, okay, is this good long term? Like no one hasn't like the information, I guess, to make that judgment call. Maybe I'm wrong, but like if someone could prove that they did, that'd be insightful to me.
No, that's quite intuitively sensible and appealing to me. That I can see what you're saying. Though I have a question. I mean, one could say that is the difference not really just a matter of simplicity versus complexity? So like
no, because circuit switch the thing with circuit switching is that with circuit switching a lot of times your system is already previously designed to be complex, right? So like an integrated circuit that's doing data flow operations required a lot of computation and intelligence to produce. Circuit switching is now okay, you have an intelligently designed system and now it can like start changing things. And not only that, but all of the things that enable computation in the first place, all the things that lead to state in computer science, like memory, are all results of stabilities in the nonlinear circuits at the low level, right? So there's bistability is a thing in like gate memory and stuff like that. This is how it works at the actual like analog level.
Right. So you could kind of say that someone who's, let's say, highly educated, a really kind of sophisticated thinker, when you ask them a question about what they think about something, their mind actually starts doing all these different computations. Really, they're like calculating, well, what's going to happen if I say this word? What's going to happen if I add
right?
this second
But then
word?
a lot of people like listen to their gut, and that like generally those people are actually usually a lot cooler because it actually works a lot better for them.
So my question here is are you kind of saying that the person who operates on a circuit switching model, they're not necessarily more simple or less complex, is what you're saying? They could be just as complex and sophisticated?
No, I mean they're generally. So I mean there's the name for it, which is like like people with interior monologues versus people who think in images versus people who think in kinesthetics, right? That kind of thing. I mean, right. I'm not a psychologist. I have some training in cognitive science just because of like the stuff that I've worked in. Right. I minored in neuroscience, but I mainly thing I was like glued to was like literally the electrical stuff or EEG stuff. Other than that, I don't know much about that.
Right. No, I'm not expecting you to, but I just mean in your terms of your models that you are familiar with. Would you say that like someone like Trump, is his circuit switching machine equally complex and sophisticated as the the computational machine of like the urban educated sophisticate?
So this is where you get into the labor ecology, right? I've kind of isolated parts of this system and be like, okay, this is computing, this is circuit switching, but really whenever you start getting into like talking about presidents or whatever, like the president is like kind of the Atman of a larger Brahman of like, I mean, like he's not doing a lot of his own computation. Like he has advisors, coming in and saying things. I guess according to that, yeah, Trump is a circuit switcher rather than a computer, because like people say he has this gut intuition kind of thing, and he just kind of acts off that, which sounds about right,
Right, but what I'm getting at is, okay, so one of the debates about Trump is how conscious is he of the games that he's playing? You know, is he basically just a buffoon who says what's in his gut and he has a knack for that? Or is he actually playing a fairly high level conscious game where he knows that his style has certain effects on certain parts of his base? And, you know, is he playing four-dimensional chess, in other words, or is he just a kind of nincompoop? So like what you're saying possibly could mean that he's actually quite a sophisticated machine. It's just a different kind of, it operates on a different model than the calculating, computing kind of educated type of person.
I mean, maybe again, like the thing I emphasize with like presidents and like in large institutional things is now you're getting into a system where the conditioning affordances are extremely heavy. In other words, he's being conditioned a lot by his position, and you know, yeah, I don't know.
So explain this idea of conditional affordances. What do you mean by that?
Oh, okay. So there's conditioning affordances or conditioned affordances. So affordance is an idea from James J. Gibson, who's the guy who invented like ecological cognitive science, or the idea of ecological perception. And what he originally was designing for was cockpits, and affordance was things like, okay, so how far is your arm from the trigger? You know, how comfortable are your legs? You know, like what's the radius of your vision that you can see through the window? That's affordance. That's what your ecology can afford you. And what you notice is again, it's a chironetic relation between the ecology and the user. So you know, the points of affordance are no longer in one single object; they're in the whole system working in conjunction. Condition affordances is just noticing that labor ecology shape labor. So like, I don't know if you've like for example, night guard watchmen are almost always overweight, and the reason why is because they have like literal metabolic issues with staying up all night. So and not only that, but I'm sure there's all sorts of social factors into like someone becoming a night watchman, because that's not exactly the most ideal like position in the world. So like the question is, what kind of person becomes a night watchman? So what kind of ecology produces a person that kind of that wants to be a night watchman.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, dude, I have a question for you. People often jokingly call me a Fed. It's kind of like a running joke. People have this conspiracy theory that I like work with the CIA or something like that. But in this case, there's literally a card on your desk that says FBI. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
This is not going to help the conspiracy theories against me.
Yeah, but it's the Twilight Zone one.
Nice. Okay. Okay. Someone in the chat asked about that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, am I actually talking with someone from the actual FBI? I'm in deep shit.
No, it's an X-Files card. I love that show.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I liked especially what you're saying about the difference between circuit switching and computation. I think that's a fruitful distinction.
Yeah, and that's actually going to have a huge impact, because like the way that humans operate at a circuit switching level in terms of like metabolic processes and like, but like all the social type of stuff, like Marx's analysis and just how you conduct yourself in reference to other social actors and like within an office setting, that's all kind of computation, right? Not only just at the individual level, but you can kind of see an office is kind of a billiard ball computer of employees going back and forth their desks and stuff like that. But it's going to be, I think that idea is actually becoming more prevalent, simply because like computer hardware is getting like there's something called the von Neumann bottleneck, which is actually like the latency bottleneck I'm talking about between circuit switching and computation. And that's the fucking Moore's law. That's really only like being limited by mostly the von Neumann paradigm. Data flow computing, you can get like way better performance for domain specific applications out of like a more circuit switching data flow architecture model. And then that's another thing that I work on. But like the approach I have for it, so I'm using these kind of like, I've been using this kind of like flowery, like made up like liberal arts Marxian language to describe things. But like the specific stuff that the theory domain that I like look in for the continuous, like the circuit switching type stuff, is called continuous automata algebra. And anyway, this is just this mathematics. This was developed in the late 60s by this guy named John Rhodes. And he basically was studying any system with transitions, so like metabolic pathways, and he found like a unifying algebraic way to reason about them, and it works for like it works for like abstract things too. So like different like stuff like real analysis and other group theoretic crap or whatever. But
Okay. And so what's the biggest advance in automated reasoning that's coming down the pike that people don't understand enough?
I mean one of the things I've been surprised by is just how is actually AI. I think AI is actually, like I said, AI is actually being slowed publicly, and that it's being developed at a military and private actor level, way beyond that which is available publicly.
Oh yeah, that's what you think?
Yeah, but going back to like the you develop this in automated reasoning and symbolic AI or AI in general is just that, like I said, the reason I left my last like job, which was mainly in symbolic and AI and automated reasoning, is I wanted to get into biomechanics. And I think because I just think that everything's going that way, more data flow type stuff. You know, even just how people consume media, like there's a whole like, some people are movie people, some people are book people. Book a book experience is very much a very computational type thing. A movie is very data flowy, and then like drug trips are like extremely data flowy, circuit switchy, right? So I mean, I think in general culture, like since the 60s and electronics and the hippie era, I think everything is becoming more circuit switchy, like McLuhan said. So
Okay, yeah, I was just thinking of McLuhan listening to what you were saying there.
mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, okay, yeah, I'll have to chew on that. Are there any other kind of like political lessons or implications from this distinction that you draw? I find that intriguing.
One of the things I see on the horizon with regards to like the whole genetic engineering thing is that the possibility that genetic engineering might actually like revitalize racial conflict, and the reason why is because different races have different genetics, and so there's going to be more incentive for one race to develop genetic therapies for their own kind than another, and that's not just among like blacks or whites; it's also Asians, Hispanics. But the interesting part is that we're increasingly going towards a society that's multiracial. So what does that mean whenever you have like your majority of your population is multiracial? Does that mean you're selling more, what I'm saying? Like you're selling more genetic therapies to the ones that are multiracial just because it's more, more convenient to produce that, our niche genetic pool is going to, have to struggle for their own, genetic therapy, stuff that is, whenever it's incompatible with their material or whatnot. I'm not a geneticist by any, degree or whatever, but it's fun to think about.
Do you do any kind of like DIY biohacking kind of shit?
I actually do. I keep a yeast culture. There's a guy I follow named Adam Adamansky. He's like a Russian automata theorist, and what he does is he programs slime mold, and I was thinking about doing that with the yeast. I also collect like fungus spores, so I have some pine spores, pine mushroom spores, and then some puffball spores, and then I keep like this little like bark fungus as a pet kind of. I work on. I've been wanting to get into analog. I'm getting into analog computing. I made a like my own like semiconductor recently with a quartz crystal, and then I'm trying to work on the mathematics to get stability out of it and like make like larger circuit out of it with with like memory and stuff, and make a data flow architecture out of it.
I have a question. If like, let's say I had like a big compound, like I lived in a massive house with like a community of a bunch of people, could you design or engineer like crazy systems that are like biomechanical but also digital around the house to kind of like supercharge the community and make everyone function better and more productive, like make a kind of utopian society with your knowledge?
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, right? But
what would you do? Like, what would you do if I gave you a compound and you could program anything you want?
It'd be fun. The proposition again. The question is like, are you a Fed? That kind of thing. Like,
Well, just hypothetically,
are you inviting me? Are you inviting little kitties to your house kind of thing? But yeah, no, the proposition.
I'm just like hypothetically, what would you do?
Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, I'd be down. It'd be interesting.
But what would you do? What would your proposals be?
I'd probably like what I'm really interested. I guess what I've been kind of talking around with the whole like ecological cognition is specifically on the question of whether symbol systems are transferred like between species. So obviously there's co-evolution and codependence of evolution between things like bees and flowers and stuff. And obviously there's some sort of relation going on between us and agriculture, right? But can we actually like get the are there actual symbol systems to where we can we could start talking to yeast, that kind of thing? That would be interesting. Yeah,
that's cool. Do you pay much attention to blockchain and stuff like that?
So one of the companies I worked for was it's a really big meme right now to like just kind of slap some product on to a blockchain and then like sell it.
Right.
It's just distributed systems.
Right.
It's
but maybe if I were to make a compound and I had a bunch of people on it, maybe we could generate slime molds that would be like their own people.
Yeah.
And we would give them identities. And then what we do is we make a distributed autonomous organization.
Yeah.
And we set up smart contracts where the slime molds can vote. Could we do that?
Yeah, probably. So there's a concept called quorum sensing, which actually like it's literally that they actually stole like techniques that bacteria use to communicate and applied it to blockchain.
Really?
Stuff. Yeah, it's called quorum sensing. It's QUORUM sensing. But
how does that work?
It's how clumps of cells like receive some threshold of input and know to send messages to the other cells to collaborate on something, right? So it's like
Oh, cool. Interesting. All right. Well, this has been super fun. It's really interesting. You're an interesting cat. And this has been fun and also intriguing in many ways. And you've dropped some pointers for future research and reflection. So, and also you've been you're very personable and pretty fun to talk with. So thank you for coming on.
Yeah, likewise, Justin.
All right. Well, good to be in touch. Was there anything else you wanted to share with the world while you're here? The whole world.
Shouts out. Let's do some shouts out. Shouts out to Shawnee, Prince Hubris. He fixed my gut bacteria. Shouts out to Bronze Age Pervert. Shouts out to my good Bengali friend. Shouts to my girlfriend. I love you. Yeah.
Cool. Wait, real quick. I gotta pick up on that. Are you friends with Bronze Age Pervert?
I follow his stuff. I think we're mutuals. I think I completely agree. I'm as a biomechanist. You just can't argue with what he's talking about. He's talking Greek natural philosophy and the kind of stuff he touches on. It's like the most ergonomic, perfect biomechanics were imbued to our culture at one point because we were hunter-gatherers and we actually had to use our bodies. That's kind of what he gets on. So
interesting. Yeah, he blocked me. I don't know why.
Yeah.
If you're in touch with him, if you're in his inner circle, tell him to unblock me.
Okay.
Also tell him to do my live stream.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, okay. This was fun. Sure, you got nothing else? No more shout outs?
Not really. I mean, I got some literature I can recommend to people, I guess. Valentin Tertian, The Phenomena of Science, Applications of Automata Theory and Algebra by John Rhodes, Cognitive Science Introduction by Stillings and Feinstein.
Do you have a blog or anything?
Yeah, it's debayou.net. Debayou.
That would be the site that the Dialectical Materialism is on, right?
Yeah. I keep it updated with kind of my current progress on the continuous automata stuff.
Well, people have
my latest project.
Cool. People have enjoyed this. So yeah, if you want to check out Anders' stuff, there's a link in the description of this video so people can check that out. Yeah, trying to think if there's anything else I want to say before I let you go. Oh yeah, just one quick thing. Do you know other like weird, interesting people in the south of the U.S. who are kind of like interesting hermetic geniuses working on weird stuff?
Yeah, but they're not on the internet. They're all like meth heads. That's what you're looking for. You're looking for meth heads. If you're looking for just smart, like tweaked out STEM people, you're looking for meth heads because they're the best chemists, But
are they actually like productive on significant things?
I mean, what do you think? They're on meth. Of course they are, man. The ones that survive, the ones that get selected, man, it's like.
So are you saying you literally know meth heads who are legit, really smart and productive on interesting projects?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're they're on meth all the time. Like, what else are they gonna do? You know?
All right.
Like,
Well, I might go on a book tour. So if I come through the south of the U.S., I might hit you up, and you can introduce me to interesting people in the south, like meth heads.
okay, cool, yeah, for sure.
All right. Cool. This is fun. I'm glad to know you, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I'll have to do another time.
All right. I'll be in touch. Send me
All
some
right,
links if you want, and I'll share it with people.
all right, cool.
All right. See you later, dude.